We'll do a review of Likutei Sichos in Chelik Chof Ches, volume 28. This is the first Sicha for the portion of Pinchas. In this Sicha, the Rebbe will bring out three levels of connection of a Yid with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. One greater than the other, as we say also, Matov Chalkeinu, Manoim Goreleinu, Mayofa Yerushoseinu. These are levels, a level Matoiv Chalkeinu, Manoim Garaleinu, Mayofi Yerushoseinu, they're going from the lower to the higher. The Rebbe explains there is a level that we earn it, basically, our connection with Hashem, because we do Torah mitzvahs. Then there is a level in which we are called a ben. We have an inherent connection. That is Manoim Garaleinu, just like a lottery, which is just arbitrary. There's no rationale, there's no reason. And then you have the level of Yerushoseinu, which is a inheritor takes the place of the father. The Rebbe very brilliantly says in the Rambam, in which the Rambam says in the last mitzvah, the Rebbe explains why the Rambam talks about Nachalos. So he brings the pasuk Uvein ein loy, ish kiyamus uvein ein loy. The Rebbe learns that uvein ein loy, he doesn't have madrega of a son, because it's the same. It takes the place. There's not even a son over there. The Mal Yusuf, very interesting twist how the Rebbe learns it. We'll go step by step. The Rebbe starts off with questioning in the Rambam why the Rambam brings this halacha in the last one of the mitzvahs. Say we're learning this Leilu Nishma Sarav Levi Yitzchok ben Rabbi Chaim Tzvi, and we'll go step by step. So in Minyan HaMitzvahs Bereish Sefer Hayat, in the beginning of the book of the Yad HaChazaka, the Rambam lists all the mitzvahs. The Rambam also have a Sefer HaMitzvahs, but in the beginning of the Sefer Hayat, when the Rambam lists the mitzvahs, in sein Sefer HaMitzvahs, similar to this is also in the book of mitzvahs of the Rambam. Schreibt the Rambam writes, als the letzte mitzvahs asay. That is the final, the last positive mitzvah. So the Rambam says, Lodun bedinei nachalos, to judge the laws of nachlos. A mitzvah to judge the laws of nachlos, laws of inheritance. And the Rambam brings the pasuk shenemar ish kiyomus, when a man dies, uven enle has no son, brings the portion of the parsha in our section after the Bnei Slavcha. They came to complain, and Hashem gave them some of the laws about what happens that when there is no sons to inherit the father, then it goes to the girls, to the daughters. Okay, so that's the Rebbe. Now the Rebbe explains, well, what is this specifically chosen, this mitzvah, as the last and final mitzvah of all of the mitzvahs asay? What's the reason for that? The Rebbe says that the Rambam, everything is precise. In the first mitzvah, we see, so the first mitzvah is to know about Hashem. Okay, we understand that should come the first. Similarly, the last mitzvah is about nachalos. The Rebbe will explain later on that nachalo is really the inheritance, is what the person gets at the end, as we'll see for later. But for now, the Rebbe just points out that everything in the Rambam is precise. Is yedua, it is known. As there say that in Rambam, that the order in the Rambam is meduik betachlis. It's precise, totally, very exact where he puts things. He's moving. So based on that, it's known, it's understood. And those was the Rambam is medayik to Messiahs and the mitzvahs asay. The fact that the Rambam specifically concludes the positive mitzvahs. with der Mitzvah von Nachlois, with the Mitzvah of inheritance, is weil die Mitzvah is the Gemar Ushleimus von Inyan HaMitzvah, is because this Mitzvah, the Mitzvah of Nachlois, is the completion and the wholesomeness of all mitzvahs. This completes and this elevates, brings the wholesomeness for all mitzvahs. So that's why this comes in the end. A mitzvah that comes in the front represents first as the first mitzvah. Ukeshem with the mitzvah rishon minyan mitzvahs, just as the first mitzvah in the count of the mitzvahs, which is leida sheyesh shom Eloka, to know that there is God. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, "Anoich Hashem Elokecha, I'm God, your God." Is the Talmud and Bepashtus. Over there we know very simply the reasoning why that's the first mitzvah. Well, das is the erste Nikadike mitzvah. That's the first and main mitzvah. From all the mitzvahs, habois lachar, from all the mitzvahs that come afterwards. Ubelshon harambam bereish sefer hayad. And to use the language that the Rambam says in the Sefer Hayad, that he says, Yisoid ha-yisoidus v'amud ha-chochmah, that the basis of all basis, foundation on what everything stands, the pillar of wisdom, is later to know. So the Rambam himself says that it's mitzvah to know that there is Hashem. That's the basis of everything. Without the Rambam is medai b'reish minyan mitzvah, the Rambam is specifically points, says it in the beginning when he calls the mitzvah, he doesn't just say stop. He said mitzvah rishona, the first mitzvah, to tell you that this is first, that comes first, to believe that there is Hashem. Cool. So just like the first mitzvah, we see it's clear that that is first because that's the most important. That's why the Rambam placed it first. Al derech zeh is muvan b'negeya the letzter mitzvah. Similar, it's understood that this is as it pertained to the last mitzvah, which in the Rambam brings down is the lodun b'dinei nachlos, to judge the laws of inheritance. As zikum b'diuk, this comes precisely as mitzvah acharena, as the last mitzvah, the mitzvah say. There's the prohibition. But this is the last positive mitzvah. Therefore, why is it? Because Z is their C and Mar from all mitzvahs. That's the conclusion. That's the finish of all the mitzvahs. That's why it was put in the end. And the question is, what is it about nachlas? What is it about inheritance that is the last mitzvah? Well, so the Rebbe first points out that the Rambam's order is precise, and just like the first mitzvah has been put there as the first, the Rambam says mitzvah rishona, as the Rambam said, because that's the most important fundamental mitzvah to know Hashem. So likewise, we also have to say about this mitzvah, the question is, what is it about nachlas, inheritance, that's the final mitzvah? In Oiz Beis, the Rebbe attempts to explain it very simply, because most of the mitzvahs, all the mitzvahs we do during our lifetime. And inheritance takes place after our lifetime. But the Rebbe is going to argue that's not so simple, because A, there's other mitzvahs that apply at the end of life. And B, this whole mitzvah of inheritance is not a mitzvah on the person. After he dies, it's not his mitzvah. It's the mitzvah on Beis Din. So that had nothing to do really with the end of the person's mitzvah, saying, oh, your final mitzvah is going to be inheritance. That's not his mitzvah. There has to be another reason, as the Rebbe will explain later on. Base. Bashkova Rishoina, at first glance, well, when you can't sagen them tam derfun, we could have said that the reason is bepashtus. Very simple. Hayois, as alla mitzvahs shebetoyre is erkim b'mechayev shel ha'adam. All Torah mitzvahs, you fulfill them during the lifetime of the person. Mashenkin, the mitzvah for nachlis, as opposed to the mitzvah of inheritance, is verbunden mit zman shel basar chayav. It's connected to the time that follows after his life. The Shvar tells you the Rambam b'simu Gemara mitzvah. That's why the Rambam places it at the end and the completion of the mitzvahs. So that would seem to be an answer why the Rambam places it out. But the Rebbe says, she's ober muvan, but it's understood. As dosis adoiche godel. This is very difficult. There are many mitzvahs where the Rambam rechnet is freyer that the Rambam enumerated before, which are associated, they're tied, with death of the person, and then things that come after the person's missa. The Rebbe in the Orah here talks about burial, talks about different items in the Orah, but this would not be the only mitzvah that's associated with the end of life. But besides the point, the Rebbe says it's not the mitzvah of the person, it's not end of his life, it's not his mitzvah, it's the mitzvah based on. In addition to it, that inyan for dinei nachlos, the idea of the laws of inheritance, is not a mitzvah motelos hala adam atzmei. It's not a mitzvah that is put on the person himself or similar. But a mitzvah based in, this is a mitzvah based in, lodun b'dinei nachlos. Bezdin has to judge the laws of inheritance. The Rambam is mevayin b'protis, them seder hanachlis, as the Rambam in detail articulates the order of inheritance in the halachas b'sefer hayad gufa. And these halacha of nachlis in the sefer hayad itself, he tells there. So it's not really his. So what would it have to do with the end of his life? That is the mitzvah for Bezdin. V'hainu, as Bezdin zol dat sein, that Bezdin needs to judge via zol sein der seder Yerushas hanachlis, how the order of the inheritance of the nachlis, of the things that in the estate, for the Levitic Yershim, for the living inheritors. We're not here trying to protect and for the one who inherits it, the inheritor, the person who died. We're trying to protect and get the ones who need to inherit. Hat doch kein Ort nicht zu verbinden dem Seder von der Mitzvah, so then there is no really make a really good reason. Why would we tie the order of this mitzvah stellen als letzter to place it at the end with Mrs. Hamerish, because the one who inherits, he dies. It is not, that's not his mitzvah. So there would be no reason to put it by there. There needs to be another reason. There has to be an additional reason to that. As we'll see, the Rebbe will explain that the end of everything is the inheritance that we inherit. We inherit Hashem when we inherit the mitzvahs and our connection with Hashem. That's the end of everything. But for now, we need to understand why the Rambam placed this mitzvah in the end of of all the mitzvahs. And as the Rebbe said, we can't say because it happens after his life, because that's not his. At the end of his life, that's not his mitzvah. That's a mitzvah based. Why would we associate it to when he dies? That's not his mitzvah. And the Rebbe asked another question. If they're mitzvah hanal, we also need explanation. The Rambam's verse to support this mitzvah. So the Rambam brings Lodin B'dinei Nachlis for this mitzvah to have the case to judge on the laws of inheritance. Bring the Rambam then posik, and now the Rambam brings the verse as mentioned. Shenemar ish kiyomus ubein eindoy, a man that dies and has no son. There is no inheritance over here. He's just telling us what took place. The parsha, a case, a scenario. A man dies and leaves no son. It doesn't say about inheritance over here. In these words, it doesn't seem that we have the content of the mitzvah, because the mitzvah is what you do with the Yerusha, not what happened. the scenario is what we start with, but then how does the inheritance, how do we distribute the assets? So also the Rebbe is trying to explain why is there the Rambam brings down the beginning of the verse without going through, which doesn't really talk about inheritance yet. It just tells you about the scenario that Kiyamus ben Eloi. So the Rebbe says that really we can say that the Rambam just brings down the first words of the whole portion, and he means the whole portion over here. But still, everything is precise, so we have to find meaning in these words of Ubein Ein Loi. The pashtus of the Rebbe Yesh Loimar, simply we can say, Balabatish, you can say that as mitbrengen the erste Wörter from der Parsha, by bringing the first words of this portion, made the Rambam im ganzen Hemshech Hadvorim shel Parsha, he means, he has in mind the entire flow of these matters in the Parsha. In Megifint, al derech zeh, in andere mitzvahs by Rambam, as we find similar to this and other mitzvahs that the Rambam writes, that he brings down the beginning and he means the flow, the rest of the Parsha. But since all aspects of Torah are totally, completely precise, everything is perfectly specific and precise, is mistaber leiman. So it is logical to say, ubefrat as the Rambam is nit moisedod the word the goymer, especially the Rambam does not really say the goymer, etc., to include the rest of the parsha. The Ram is oiv hemshech parsha to hint for the rest of the portion. As in the Werter allein drückt sich aus an inyan ikri inyan hanachlis, that in these words themselves, uvein ein loi, expresses something main important in the idea of the nachlis. So the Rebbe says now in Nois Gimel that the reason the Rambam ends with Nachal is similar to the reason that the Mishnayos ends with the statement that Hashem will give a Nachal to every tzaddik. And it's explained that it ends because that's the basically in the end of the Mishnayos, that is the sort of the payment. The schar is what the Eibishter gives for every tzaddik. Here, the schar for all the mitzvahs is what we inherit. Then the Rebbe is going to go into the various different levels in the inheritance. Gimel, Yesh Loimar. So we can say, Ados was the Rambam is Messiah, the minyan ha-mitzvahs. Mitlot medin in achlos. The reason why the Rambam concludes the counting of the mitzvahs with the mitzvah to judge the laws of nachlis, of inheritance, is al derech mivimengefin. This is similar to what we find as their siyum for Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, that the end of the sixth Siddharim of the Mishnah is mit Maimer. It ends with the saying, Osid HaKadosh Baruch Hu lahamchil l'chol tzadik v'tzadik cholu. The Eibishter is going to give to every tzaddik the 310 worlds. Shenemar lahanchil yesh. There is yesh, there is 310 to inherit to those who love me. So it concludes with the statement that Hashem will inherit every tzaddik. Uvi mefarshim zanim mevayir, the mefarshim explain them tam pravosim mishnayis davke medem maimer. They explain the reason why the Mishnayos ends with this sentence. Because we're talking about here the payment of the reward for the work that one does in Torah mitzvahs after you finish the work. We talk about Osida Kodesh Baruch Hu, what the Eberster is going to give you in the future for the world. Voskum Nochum Gemar Shleimus from Libud Vikim HaTorah Mitzvah, which comes after you finish and you complete the study and the observance of the Torah Mitzvah, the Torah Shabbal Peh, then you get Lahanchel. And the Mishnah is Medayik, and the Mishnah is specifically uses the language Osid HaKadosh Baruch Hu Lahanchel. Doesn't say Eibishter will give you or the Eibishter will gift you. It says Osid HaKadosh Baruch Hu Lahanchel. Well, the Gemul was kum b'gmar ha'aveda the Torah mitzvahs, because the payment that comes in the end of the service that you did in Torah mitzvahs is that lahanchil, is inheritance. Inheritance, that's the type of the schar. We can say the same thing in our case, in the order of mitzvah that Rambam brings down, the mitzvah of lahanchil by Rambam. That is Messiah with their mitzvah for Nachlas. He concludes with the mitzvah of inheritance. While the siyum b'shleimus from all the mitzvahs of Torah, because the finish and completion, wholesomeness of all mitzvahs of the Torah is verbunden mit inyan hanachla, is associated with the idea of nachla. Kinal, as we said before, lahanchil, you get as a reward at the end the level of Hanchil. And the Rebbe explains now that we're talking about Lahanchil, and we're talking about inheritance of what? We're talking about the inheritance of Eretz Yisrael in the Pasuk. Lahanchil, to inherit Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is the Ebershter's land. And the Ebershter's land, that should go over to the Yid. The Eber says, Lahanchil, to have you inherit my land. And the Rebbe is going to explain that there's three ways and connection of inheriting the land. The Yeshleimer Habir V'chol Hanal Be'egdim. Explain all the above by first introducing. Parshas Nachla state in the Torah als Hemshech zu Inyan HaYerusha V'Chaluk von Eretz Yisrael. The portion of inheritance is written in the Torah as a continuation to the idea of the inheritance and the division of the land of Eretz Yisrael. That's the way in the Parsha it came, that was Bekesher Lezeh, in association to the Eberster inheriting Yidden and dividing Eretz Yisrael. So in connection with this, of the Bnei Tzlofchad Gitainet, the daughters of Tzlofchad, they argued that no lonu achuza betoich achei avinu. Give us a portion amongst our father's brothers, because their father had no sons, and the father's brothers, Tzlofchad's brothers, were going to inherit. They wanted a part also in that. One of them is Yikum in the parsha. That's why we come this portion. Ish kiyamus goyim. So this is all about inheriting the land of Eretz Yisrael and getting the nachala, the inheritance, in their complaint to give them. Gevitmen in dem inyan von chalukas haaretz. So we find in the idea when we divide the land, so you have inheritance Yerusha, but there is three specific details in Yerusha. In the minyan of Haluksa are noisev their clothes, the kerzach from Yerusha, in addition to generally inheritance of the land. So specifically, there were three ways the way they inherit. This is an inherit. There were three particular ways of inheritance. Aleph, Yerusha Sa'aretz. One was the inheritance of the land. And that was just without Everybody inherited the land, just the inheritance itself, without any specific process. Base, the Chaluka be'oifum from Larav Tarbe Nachlosi be'lamat Tarbe Nachlosi. Then the distribution, in a way, the one who has more, you increase the inheritance, and the one who has less, you diminish the inheritance. This is already a logical and a pieces that were given or assigned based upon lot or less. It was logical. And number three was Gimel. On Gimel ach begoydel yichaluk yisod. The land was distributed a lottery. The lottery was arbitrary, seems like. It was a goyrel, throwing a lot. So you had inheritance and you had logic by size, and then you have lottery. The Rebbe explains, this haste, which this means, as the Sichos, but that is Yisrael to Eden, is beprotis in Drayafanim. The connection of Eretz Yisrael to Eden, and when you look at it specifically, there are three ways. Aleph, Yerusha, inheritance. Beis, Chaluka, Pitam, Badav, Sechel, dividing it by reason and the rationale. Norav Tarbe Gomer. And Gimel, Chaluka, Pigoidel, to divide it by lot. Yes, Neumar, Hatam Lozer. So what's the reason that we need all three levels? Why do we need these three matters? Because these are actually three ways of acquiring Eretz Yisrael. This is not just getting any land. Those was in Bakum and Eretz Yisrael, al Snachlo. The fact that the Yidden got it as their inheritance is given its tam ibergem to tell Nalan to Yidden. It wasn't just planning to give over and to divide a land. No. We're talking about Eretz Yisrael, and we're talking about giving a land which belongs to Hashem. And we're talking about how to make that land that is Hashem connect to the Yid. There's three specific levels that we got to discuss how we acquire the land. Eretz Yisrael is doch nachlas Hashem. Eretz Yisrael is a land of Hashem. Tamid ein Hashem lekecha bo mereshis shana medachvis shana. That's the place where God's eyes are always from the beginning to the end of the year. The far is nisinoso to Eden davke midem. So that's why the way it's given to the Eden, specifically behesem midem was Eden seine nachlas Hawaii. This fits with the fact that Eden are our inheritance of Hashem. Hashem's inheritance, which belongs to Hashem, Eretz Yisrael, it's Nachlas Hashem as the Yidden who are inheritance of Hashem. Verbunden mit Eibishter, connected to Hashem. Not just getting a land, we're getting a connection to Hashem. We're getting a land that belongs to Hashem, which is Hashem's, and it's given over to us. With them, K'maymer Chazal, that is because the way they're connected to Hashem, that's how they get Eretz Yisrael. K'maymer Chazal, Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem says, the Kadosh Baruch Hu says, Yovoyu Yisrael, Shabou Lechelki, let the Yidden who have come to my portion. Yidden are a portion of Hashem. The Yinchalu is Ha'aretz Shabou Lechelki, and they should inherit the land that came to my portion. So my portion, the Yidden, are inheriting my portion, Eretz Yisrael. Ubemela is the Nesina von Eretz Yisrael, Nachlas Hashem Tzuyid Abayit. Therefore, when the Eibishter gives this inheritance, Eretz Yisrael, to the Yidden, Megale, it reveals when he's an Oizdruk from Eden's Farmund mit Eibishter. It reveals, and it's an expression of the Yid's tie to Hashem. The way the connection between getting the land expresses, giving the land is the Eibishter giving his land to a Yid, that expresses the Yid's connection to the Eibishter. And the Yid's connection to Eibishter could be in different ways. And therefore, a Yid is connected to Hashem, as we find, in three ways. And those are the three ways, the way the Nachal of Hashem gives over to his connection to the Yid. Kishem v'men gefin, just as we find, as der Verbund von Eibishter mit den Eden is in drei Etfanim. The Yidden connect to Hashem in three ways. Like we say, Ashereinu matov chalkeinu. How fortunate, how good is our portion, connection with Hashem. Umanoyim Goreleinu, how sweet, how pleasant is our lot that we are connected to Hashem, that we have, Hashem is our lot. And how beautiful is our inheritance, that Hashem is our inheritance. Basically, Hashem is our portion, Hashem is our lot, and Hashem is our inheritance. Similarly, the way the Eibishter gave Eretz Yisrael to the Yidden, it's in these three ways. He gave it as a chelik, as a portion. He gave it as a goydel, as a lot, and he gave it to Yerusha as an inheritance. And the highest level is Yerusha, because they matov chalkeinu, manoim goraleinu, and then eventually me'of Yerusha. The bald, as in him seder from the drei inyonim, in the order of these three matters, chelik, goydel, Yerusha, a portion, a lot, an inheritance, is the letzter, the last one, u'ma'yof Yerusha, which means ilu acharilu, we're going up one elevation after the other elevation. Is there full move on from this? We understand as Yerusha is a tiferun inyan umayla, that Yerusha has himself a deeper matter, has an advantage with the freer the kitzvei than the previous two. It's a review. So now we need to understand what is this different level. First of all, what is der bir v'chilik zwischen chelik goydel v'Yerusha? What's the difference, the explanation of the difference between a portion, a lot, an inheritance, als fanim and ways in a Verbund zwischen Eden mit Eibishter, how a Yid is tied to Hashem, being Hashem's part, a lot, or inheritance of Hashem. And I guess and that also explains how we connect to the land through the different ways. And number two, how does the definition of Yerusha in the Pasuk Ish Kiyamus, how do we explain this Pasuk Ish Kiyamus, the Sichos zwischen dem Kesher zwischen Yid mit Eibishter, in the connection between Yid with the Eibishter, that we get that connection. As the Rebbe will explain on this is the highest level of connection. The Rebbe will explain now in Nois Hey that Chalkeinu is a limited connection. It's sort of a like a mecher, like we say, a sale. You get because you paid for it. Goraleinu is like a matana. It's like a gift. You didn't pay for it. You just get it. It's a lot. And Yerusha is you actually take the place of Yerusha, and it's not even separate. It is one with the Moirish, as the Rebbe will explain. I say, so first the Rebbe is going to say the difference between our portion and our lot is bedugmas the chiluk from mecher and matana. That is similar to the difference of a sale and a gift. So Elkeinu is more like a sale, and Goreleinu is more like a matana, is more like a gift. Mecher, a sale is totally in the kesef b'tashlum alekech. A sale hinges on the money and the payment of the buyer. Was sold for them dovranimka, that which he pays for the item that was sold. So there is a connection with the buyer to what he gets. He gets what he paid for. But Matone kommt mit seiner Zäune hatoi von dem neuesten Matone. A gift comes because of the goodwill of the one who gives the gift to give. On tashlu mitzad makabel that comes without payment from the recipient. Now, derech zeh is euch benegeya dam shoches v'hashpoes from Obersten Tzid. Similarly, is also as it connects to the extension and the flow from the Eberster to Yid. Now, there's two ways of that connection of the extension and the flow that comes from Hashem to a Yid in the way of a sale or in the way of a gift. As einen Faran in them zwei Faran. Number one, you have Schara Mitzvah, the reward. That's when you bring it down through the work of the person, the arousal from below, you work for it to bring it down. And base number two, just that's it's an arousal of above on its own wants to be mashpia. One is like a sale, you earn it, and one is like a gift. And that's generally also the difference between our portion and our lot. Chelkenu, our portion is der Verbund von Eden mit dem Eibischen. That's the tie of a Yid with Hashem, was tut sich auf durch der Avoide von Yid. That is accomplished through the service, the work of a Yid. Like a sale, you have to pay for it. Our lot is the iskashrus from Eden mit Eibischen. That's the connection, the tie from a Yid with Hashem. Mitzadem was bochar bonim mikol ha'am. Hashem chose us. He chose us. The Eibishter chose us. Was amitis inyan habichida. The true level, when we say somebody chooses, bichida chavshis, freedom of choice, which means there is no advantage. He's not choosing it for some reason, but it's a free choice. He has the option. Is when der davar hanifchar wird ausgeklippen nicht mit sada tam cheshbon. When the chosen item has been chosen, not because there is a reason or a calculation. So the milas hadovar hanifchar kietz, where there's some advantage to it, why what it was chosen. There blows their far, but the only reason why you're choosing it, that's what the one who chooses, that's what he wants. There is nothing else, there's not reasoning for that. And in them, he says, so in this aspect, this is similar to the choosing that you do through the lottery. Was is neat, it's not on a reasonable, logical reasoning. Verbunden mit welchem, mit Miles Hadover, welchem Warte Geurel. It is not associated, it's not tied to advantage of the item in which is throwing the lottery. The Geurel just falls out, it does not connect it to anyone. When verlost sich in ganzen Leben Geurel, you trust, you rely fully, totally on the lottery. Nicht wissentlich wird euch fallen. You have no idea how it's going to come out. As the pasuk uses the language in the pasuk, b'cheik yutal es hagoyro, in his cheik, in his bosom, he carries, he throws the lottery, Hashem kol mishpotei, and the judgment, the rule, the result comes from Hashem, whatever the lottery comes out. And this is similar, the level of goyro, similar to matone. By mecher, it depends on the recipient. He has to pay for it. That's the level of chelkenu, a portion of the person, because of the of his connections. Arusa de latata, he worked with, but here this comes from above. This is similar to a gift, but he's opening not from Rotzen Ames. This only depends on the will of the giver, nor meet them chiluk, but they're still different. A gift, even if it's a gift, relative to we say that it doesn't come from the buyer, he doesn't invest in it, the gift is all up to the giver. But still, we say that if it's not that he did him something a favor, why would he give him a gift? So there is some connection. There's a difference. Matona has some common point with sale. For although the gift comes because of the will of the giver, there is still a reason for the gift, which is still tied to the recipient. Like we say, had he not done something pleasant to the giver of the gift, would not give him a gift. So even though we're saying a gift is totally up to the giver, like a lottery, which is totally up to the lottery, what they wish to, what will choose, the lot will come out to. But still, there has something, a connection to a sale, because people don't just give out gifts. It has to do with something that he has done for it. The girl has a lottery, has no connection to any calculated or any reasoning. We are chosen like a goydel by Hashem, totally. It's similar to it, but it's not really fully the same. A lottery means that it is not dependent at all on the person, what he does. It's totally dependent on Hashem, what Hashem chooses to do. But I'm curious, deeper, more, further, than Inyan from Chelkenu is verbunden nicht nur mit der Avoide von Jeden. The part, which is our portion, our lot, is not only tied to the service of a Yid, but it is actually connected with their Metzias, with the essence of who they are. Und die Neshama von Aiden wird angerufen, Chelik Havayah. Up to now, we're saying the Avoide gets us the Chelkeinu. The Rebbe says, no, deeper, Chelkeinu is even, when you go deeper, it's even the essence. It's not the work, it's the essence of a Yid. Chelik Hashem Amri. Ubelashon HaTanya, to use the Lashon of the Tanya, Benefesh Hashenis B'Yisrael, Chelik Kamil Mamash. It's a portion of God. So Chelkeinu doesn't necessarily mean a connection from Avodah. It means that we have it automatically. So how is that so much different than Goyro Leinu? We are by lot, which Hashem chose us. This is also inherently, we have given a soul, a Chelik Hashem. Yesh leimar az oich lekabe od der meile from Chelkeinu. Even relative to this advantage of Chelkeinu being a part, Achelik Alakai is Doa Yisrael in Inyan HaGoyvel. There is an advantage still in the level of the lottery. The Rebbe explains, Das was mir sagt auf der Neshama von Aiden, this that we say about the soul of a Yid, Chelik Elokam Malmam, that he's a part of Hashem from above, actually. Drikt ois the Milo and Kedusha in their Metzias from Aid. That expresses the advantage and the holiness of the Yid's existence, that he is a portion, his Neshama is a portion of Hashem. Was yesh leimar. You can say, as the Far verbindet Alter Rebbe the Milo. That's why the Alter Rebbe ties this advantage from Chelik Elokah Mimal Mamish, which we're saying a part of Hashem, he ties it with them was seen when angerufen Bonim. The fact that we're called Bonim Lamokim, we're sons. Bonim Atem Hashem Elokechem. You are children, sons to God you got. Why? Because Azoivia Ben Kipshutai, just as literally a son was ein kesher zum of his tie to his father is an inyan was batzitzich zu mitzias amen. That is something which references the son's existence, that he exists. He is a ben. Bonim atem, you are a son. It's not like you're nobody. It's not like you don't exist because the Eibishter is here. He is a ben. Kumtuis. So it turns out, as euch der inyan in chalkeinu, even that part that we're saying that you're a chelik mimal mamish is bedugmat zum inyan hamecher was kum mitzadam lekeach. That is similar to the sale, to idea it's selling, that it comes because of the buyer, which means in this case it's the entity of the son that you connect with Hashem, the bonim atem Hashem lekechem. That's the level of chelkenu. Masha'enkin the inyan from Goyal Leinu, as opposed to the idea of our lot, that our lot, which is bochar bona, he chose that, is not that ilui in their mitzias. But there, the advantage is not that there is the entity of the ben from a yid. Was wie hoch only sein, doesn't matter how high he is. Even the highest level of a yid is a fort a mile of kedushim uvelas. It is still yet. It's an advantage and a holiness that is limited. Bibal as is the kedusha, welcher is verbunden mit seinem Metzias, since it's this holiness which is tied to his entity. So what is it? Das ist die Skashus, das kommt im Ganzen mit Satan Becher HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That comes because of the chooser. It comes because of Hashem. Shalamayla Mekol Medida V'Agbola, which is beyond the V'Agbola. So the Rebbe explains deeper. Before he explained that the level of Chelkenu is the Maila of a Yid, and the level of Goyal Leinu is the Bechira from a Yid. Now the Rebbe says the level of Chelkenu is not the Maila of a Yid, it's the Ben of a Yid. But the Ben of a Yid is still an entity separate. And we say that the Yid is a chelik from Hashem, and that's like the level of Chelkenu, which means that he is a Metzias, and because a Metzias of a Ben could be the highest level, but he's still a Metzias. Goyal Leinu means it's not him. It's the Eibishter, it's the Boicher, it's all Mitzat Hashem, and not the other person. V'yesh leimar. Ados is the Kefa Loshen HaPosuk. This is the duplicate language of the Posuk. Ki am kodesh ato Hashem elekecha. First he says, you are a holy people. And then he says, U'b'cho bochar Hashem, and then Hashem showed you them. Rashi is mefarish, Rashi explains. Ke'am kodesh ato, you are holy. Kedushas atzmecha mavisecha. Your self-kedusha of yourself, that comes from your father. You're a ben. V'oid u'b'cho bochar Hashem. Then Hashem chooses you. Am kodesh ato, you are kodesh. There's the kedusha that you get. Mavisecha, and then there's the Yur Kodesh. Am Kodesh is the kedusha mitzadem. Am Kodesh Ato is the kedusha mitzadem was bonim atem Lashem Elokeichem. That's the kedusha that you are sons to God, your God. But that's the kedushas atzmacham. That is your essence, your kedusha, and you get it ma'avisecha. But it's not the Eberster, it's your own. It's your kedusha. It's a mecher. It's an investment. It's the person. It's this atzmecha. But that is the Eberster. That kind of ness is faran. But there is a higher level. The oid Hashem, that Hashem chooses you. As in Eden is faran bechidas ha'atzmus. That in Eden there is the choice of the atzmus the b'chol b'char, and that is the level of Goyd Aleinu, which is totally beyond the metzius of the person that comes only in Elamailu. So the Rebbe explained these two levels in Chelkei, in Chelkei and Goyd Aleinu. And the Rebbe explains now that the Goyd Aleinu doesn't come mitzad Mailas Haben, but it comes entirely mitzad Bechidas Ha'atzmus in the highest level. So what's higher than this? So now you have the two levels that we're talking about, Chelkeinu and Goyd Aleinu. And now we're going to explain Yerushoseinu. Yerushoseinu is even in a higher level than the Chelkeinu Goyd Aleinu. But Alpha became still, while we're saying it's all about Hashem, about the Boichem, not about it's about the giver, the gifter, not the one who's getting the gift. So still, also a gift which comes because of the giver, it still has a tie to the recipient. Matona is in Yonah. What does a matona mean? Was the nation gita weg the zach. You gift, so you give to somebody else. Then mekabel hamatona. So you're giving something to the recipient. With that sugitron kind. You do it with a closeness and a devotion. You are pleased with the other one. So the other person, no matter, even though it's a gift, but there is a other person there that you're giving to. Similarly, is also to this level that we're saying by Maton is also by Goydel. Afal P as the Goydel is nit verbunden mit Meiles Hadom. Although the Goydel isn't tied to the advantage, it's a lottery, was Makum Tal Yodei that you get through lottery canal. Doch is das an Inyan von Haknoa Hashpoa. Still, it's an idea still of acquisition or giving, because the lottery falls on one of many things. That Vilma Kuman ain't from Kamazach. He wants to throw the lottery to give one of many things. They want to divide up with another person, make a lottery. Nor biprotius welche bashtim der Gödel. But specifically, the Gödel determines which one gets it. But what is the purpose of the Gödel? The purpose is to give, is somebody else over here. As is over Farana Dritin in the realm of Yerush, there's a third level, Yerusha. Was Gidre is nit an Esinatzat. It's not giving to somebody else. Nor was der Yeresh is Oimed bim Koim HaMeirish. The one who is inheriting takes the place of the inheritor, the one who's inheriting. HaYeresh is nit kein Tzveite Metzias. The inheritor is not a separate, a different entity, the Chosim from the Meirish, which gets assets, gets that from the one who inherits. To use the language of the verse, Tachas amisecho yiyu. In the place of your fathers, the sons will be. The sons take the place of the father. They don't inherit, get from somebody. The Yiddish is Oimed Bimkoim Hamirish. He stands in the place of the inheritor. And is that Etzem Hamirish. He becomes the essence of the one who inherits. And then automatically he gets the ownership of the assets of the inheritor because he is just takes the place of the inheritors, not a separate mitzias. So it turns out, as the Maila from Yerusha of Mecher Umatona is, what is the advantage of Yerusha over selling and giving is you don't give anything. You don't give to someone else. It just comes in and takes your place. Mecher Umatona, the Goydel, selling it or gifting or lottery, from the they are an idea of giving and a flow. It's not as the person is standing by himself in himself. It is as if he's giving the flow to somebody who's outside of him. Und der Chilik zwischen sie is not the difference between them. He's giving it outside. Question is why? The reason, the cause, why are you giving it? It's not in their siba from their hashpo, is only in the reasoning for this flow. By mecher is the lekeach. By mecher, by sale, the reasoning is the buyer. Sign it to me, mecher, the money that he gives for the sale. This sibas hashpo, they're the reason for the flow. Maton is as the rotzna. Buying a gift is the will of the giver. But what does the giver want? Is to give him the zach tzveit. He wants to give it to someone else. So there's a someone else. It's not in himself. It's this expression to someone else. Pashenki by Yerusha, as opposed to by inheritance, is nitashpoetzim. Of them is not giving. It's not a flow to someone. Was his chutz memitzias ariyemedish, who's outside of his entity. Thus was the Yiddish bakum de nechosim. Why does he get the assets? Not given to him. He's valid as he stands, he takes the place of the Medish. And that's what the idea of Yerusha is saying. All of them are giving to the outside. And Medish, the one, he steps up and he becomes the Medish. And das ist der Öftu from Mayofa Yerusha saying, this is the novelty of Yerusha relative to Chelkenu Verlein. Chelkenu is the Farbund von Eden and the Lakus. Chelkenu is the tie of a Yid with godliness. Wie der Eberster hat sich Kavyochel mit Samson gewähnt, as Hashem had, so to speak, restricted himself, as the Avodah Milas von Eden soll bei ihm Tefes Mokum sein. That the work and the advantage that you didn't have should mean something to Hashem. That's how Hashem restricted himself. That when we do Torah mitzvahs, it means that Nochmer. Lagabi, the Meibustan Alein, relative to the Eberster himself, is Kibashanemar Gam Bein Ba'ach Einloy. He has no son and he has no brother. So relative to Hashem, there is no such a thing. Why are we called sons? Is nor with the Eibstes mit Samson Kaviyachol. This is already a restriction in the Torah from Av to be described as a father. That's the level of Chelkenu. Geralenu is Bachar Bono. That's the level in which Hashem chose us. Is there kesher from Eden with neighbors to Mitzad der Madregen Elakus? That's the tie from Eden with Hashem, from the level of godliness. By Eden, wo Metzias Mitzad Atzmei is Nit Tevis Moken. At that level, the entity of a Yid, because of being a Mitzvah, does not take up any room, unlike the Tzimtzum they can place, the Malachim, where the Abish where Chalkeinu, where it makes a difference. The Kesher is nor Mitzad B'chirosa Chopshis Shalakadosh Baruch. That connection by Gorolenu is because that's what Hashem chose. It's not because of any Milos. It's not because of the entity, it's because of Hashem. But Ava became, but still, is Oich Bochar Bonu. Chose us in Yonei. What does Bochar Bonu mean he chose us? Was the Abish that climbs Toisazach, Hashem chooses something. Was his Kaviyachal Nideh, which is, so to speak, not him. But the gather from climbing, because when we say you pick something, you're picking something outside. It's B'shayches to a Tzveite Zach, that is in relation to something else. She's nor, it's only as the Sibas HaBechira is nit mitzad Mailas HaDover HaNivchar. It's only that we're saying, it's not because we're choosing. We're choosing something else, but why are we choosing something else? Not because of the advantage, what we're talking about Goydolenu. It's not, it's because the Maila Nivchar, nor the Rotzin of Bechiras HaMoicher, that is the will and the chose of the one that chooses. Of the Eibishter is Manoyim Goydolenu, and that's our lot. Hashem chose us, but Hashem chose something outside it. Hashem ken Yerushalayim. What we say Yerushalayim is in Yonei. Was Eden seine Kaviochel ein Zach. What does Yerushalayim mean? That we're one thing. Mit Atzmusi is Baruch. We're one thing with the Eibishter's blessed essence. Yisrael v'kutshabrichu kulachad Eden Hashem one. Der Verbund von Eden mit dem Eibishter is in Atzmusi is Baruch. The tie of Eden with Hashem is in his blessed Atzmus. Was his Hecher from welcher is his Tnuah shall Tzimtzum Nechulu. That's beyond any kind of a movement of a Tzimtzum. The far wird es angerufen B'Shem Yerushalayim. That's why we call this inheritance. That's not restricted at all. That's we are one thing with Atzmus. Adosis they gather from Yerushalayim. This is the definition of inheritance. Because the Yiddish is Oymed b'Mokim HaMoedish. The inheritor takes the place of the inheritor, the one who inherits. The far must add is the Etzem HaMoedish, the one with the Moedish. Test. Ot die drei Inyonim and the discussions from Eden with neighbors. These three aspects and the tie of a Yid with Hashem, Chalkeinu, Gereinu, Yerushalayim, seine verbunden Bechlolus mit the drei Klolus diket Kufes von Am Yisrael. Generally speaking, they are connected to the three general periods of the Jewish people. You have Aleph Koydem Matan Torah, before Matan Torah, Beis Noch Matan Torah, after Zman von Avodas Yisrael V'Kiyum HaMitzvahs, when Yidden do observe mitzvahs, and Gimel also love it. When the future to come, that's the Zman HaGemul. That's the time of the payment. Bis zu Tachlis HaShleimus B'Zeh, till the ultimate, wholesome, the greatest level. These are these three levels. The Shleimer Abir, them. Say the explanation. Euch far Matan Torah sei nicht angerufen geworden Bonne. Yidden, before Matan Torah, they were also called Bonne. Wer steht bei Yitzias Mitzrayim. Already by the Exodus of Egypt, it says, B'nei B'chayr Yisrael. Euch far Matan Torah, because also before Matan Torah, it's gestanden begolim the Meile from Yidden. The advantage of Yidden was then also openly, Lagabe Alu Messiah, relative to all the nations of the world, but also Gibrach to Yitzias Mitzrayim. That led to the Exodus of Egypt. But this is alt given a Meile in Zeir Metzius. This was an advantage in their being, in their service. Matan Torah is this Gala geworden, by Matan Torah is revealed that Inyan from Ubonu Bachartum Kalam Meloshim, that David chose us, all nations, all languages. Bechinas HaKadosh Baruch, choice of Hashem. And in Am Yisrael, Hashem chose us to Kiram. The Farots of those Oizgedrikt, and that's where it expressed in the Sichos HaTorah, in the giving of the Torah Bahamitzvahs to Yid. Und in dem ist bestanden der Auftrag von Torah Mitzvahs und Matum Torah. That was the novelty that took place, the Torah Mitzvahs that we give Matum Torah. Not because of our Maila, but because of the Bechira. That's what the Eibishter gave us. Not because of any Maila, like before Matum Torah. Und in dem ist bestanden der Auftrag von Torah Mitzvahs und Matum Torah. The Torah Mitzvah was given Matan Torah relative to the Gavin Rabbeida from Eden of Vishulu for Matan Torah. That's the advantage. Leaf name Matan Torah is the Rabbeida from Eden given Gemosten, like Kirchen, like Koyachan, like Kirchanim. Before Matan Torah, the service of Eden was measured according to the power of the created being. Like the money you put in for the sale, like the Mecher. To the extent that a created being can reach with his own powers. As opposed to when David gave us the Torah, was no son lono as Torah, so he gave us his Torah. If the Torah mitzvahs faran is in the Torah mitzvah faran the Torah mitzvahs, we have the power of the Creator. That's after Matan Torah. After the fulfillment, completing of the fulfillment of the Torah mitzvahs, then by Yidden is Galav and Zera Atzmis the Kemaila. By Yidden will be revealed their essence elevation, by Yofa Yerushalayim. How beautiful is our inheritance, that Inyan Funachma, the idea of inheritance, as Yidden Zainen Chad Kav Yochel B'Tatzmus Yisbarach, one with Hashem. So then is the highest level, not only the Bechiras Ha'atzmos, but that we are an inheritance, we are a Yodesh, and in the stead of the Yodesh, we are one with Atzmos. Yud. Yes, Loimar, we can say, das ist der Biur in dem Siyum von Sichos Sidrei Mishnah. This is also the explanation in the conclusion of the Mishnah. We say, Osid, HaKadosh Baruch Hu lahanchil, lahanchil oya vayesh. He says Hashem will give us. The pasuk says to give us the yesh. To give us the yesh means to give the true essence, the metzias atzmus. The Rambam is mevayer. The Rambam explains that the loshin yesh, based of metzius atmidis. Yesh means it exists. It points to the continuous metzius. There's no end, it always the says. That's what he's about it. The Yesh Amiti, that means the true essence, the true Yesh. Und lahadchil oiva Yesh made, and what is with David they gave us the truth? Das was a Yid wird ein Sach kaviyachom mit Yesh Amiti, that a Yid becomes one thing with the true Yesh. And das is the Diruk, lahadchil oiva Yesh. Inherit, because inherit is the Yerusha part of these Ardus from the Eden with the Yeshua Amiti. The true union from a Yid with the true Yesh HaMuchlad, the total Yesh Hashem, is Mitzad the Inyan HaNachlu. That is from the idea of the inheritance. Was Eden seinen Kaviyochel that they become the entity of the inherited before. So this the Rebbe explains the Siyum HaMishnayis. Damit wird man verstehen, was der Rambam bringt bei der Mitzvah von Nachlis, darf die Wörter also understand. Why by the Mitzvah of Nachlis he brings the words Ish Kiyamus, he says Uvein Ein Loi, only these words the Rebbe asked. Because while the because the spiritual idea of what does it mean, inheritance, to this expresses itself. Ubein Eloi, there's no son because he's a part of the Moedish. The Milas from Chelkeinu Vereleinu, the advantages of being a lot, being a portion of Hashem and a lot, seine Verbundung mit der Madrege, those are associated, tied to the level, wie der Eberster sich missamtzim in der Madrege von Av. As the Eberster, as Hashem, contracts himself, restricts himself to become an Av. Was gibt an Ort auf ein zweiter Metzias, that allows for another entity, Aben. Und es wird die Metzias, then becomes this entity, Afilu Mitzad. So that's Chalkeinu Gerelenu. Even Mitzad Madrege from Gerelenu, those was that Eberstead is Boicher in Eden. Why is Hashem choosing them? Even though we're saying it's all in the lottery, it's in his choice. Is the Chover Teuchen in Abchide was that is a Boicher. So what is the idea that he chooses them? As his own Zaymon, they should be sons. Mashenkin, which is external, outside. Mashenkin, der Geder from Yerushalayim is verbunden mit Atzmus Shalakadosh Baruch Hu. But the definition of Yerushalayim is tied to the essence of Hashem. Was dort sagt man, Ubein Engloi, there's no level of pain. And his Hachet from Welchenes is Inya Shechutz Imenu. He's higher than any kind of item which is outside of him. I feel with that. Even to choose something outside him, no. It's Yerusha. Dorten sein Yidden Mushush. That's where Yidden are rooted. Yisrael, B'Kutshavrichu, Kulu Chad Yidden, and Hashem are all one. This is Sichos, Yud Gimel Nissen, Shabbos Parshas Shmini, Tov Shin B'Mei.